What does it really take to build a capital project management business from scratch inside one of the world's largest real estate brands? Today, I had the incredible opportunity to have an interview with Iain Davidson, State Chief Executive for Colliers in the Australian Capital Territory. We talk about everything from AI, software, building, and also a bit around his career. So you don't want to miss this discussion. I hope you enjoy it. So welcome, Iain.
Good morning, Rebecca. Hope you're well.
All right, so I want to kick off with a question around your career. So what drew you to capital project management in the beginning, and what motivates you and excites you and I guess gets you to stay in the industry?
Yeah, sure. Well, obviously, back at the beginning, I wasn't necessarily drawn to project management. I started actually in civil engineering, and my first job was being a CAD drafter in a civil engineering office. But one thing led to another, and it was probably a couple of friends and colleagues who my first real job was in a client-side project management firm. And that's where the project management as a client-side project management career sort of started for me. And that was sort of the foundations. In that 10 years later, I made the shift out of, that client-side project management discipline to Colliers. And I've been at Colliers ever since.
So next I want to talk a bit about how you have built this business from scratch. So You built a capital project management business inside Colliers from scratch. What were some of the biggest challenges in doing that?
Yeah, well, look, just before talking about the challenges, probably just going back to how it sort of all came about. At the time when I joined Colliers, they didn't really, within the ACT, they didn't really have a project management capability. They had acquired some businesses around the country in Australia, and those were up and running and being very successful. That was across Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane. And within the ACT, there were discussions happening when I joined around the bolt-on acquisition project management, buying the local firm and bringing it in. At the time, I'd come from a very successful project management business that had recently sort of sold, and I just had the feeling like, the numbers that they were talking were a lot. And I just thought, hang on a second, I think we could build this organically. I feel like the networks and the position that Colliers is in within the property, real estate, professional services space that they operate in, there's enough connections and projects there to lay the foundations to build this organically. And so when the business was looking at those acquisitions, I remember the paper coming across my desk and, what do you think of this one? And had a look at it and went, they're not that good. Why don't we just build it? Anyway, they went, cool. All right, well, you can do it. And it was interesting at that point in time when that discussion happened, I'd actually moved across to Colliers to not be a project manager. Like my career goal was to move into leasing and to be a leasing agent. So that's why I made the shift. And sure enough, after a couple of months, I was saying, hang on, you can start up a project management business. So I had to go back internally and go, well, is that actually what I want to do for my career? Do I want to go back into the project management space? I remember having the conversation with the state chief executive at the time saying, yeah, I'll do this, but I want to still stay in office leasing. So I'm going to do this 50-50 role and see if we can make it work. Anyway, so that's what I did. There was challenges everywhere. The year that we kicked this off was 2020. 2020 was the first year. Starting a project management business, effectively at the end of 19, straight into 2020 when things were changing and everything was kicking off was a really, you didn't know what was going to happen. But what I did know inside Colliers was we had some really, really strong business lines that did a lot of capital work projects for private clients in all the capital cities around the country. And if I could tap into that network and deliver a really good project management service, I was confident that I could build a team. And that's what happened.
And so do you have to sort of sell your services to those business units? How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. From the outset, it was always additional service offering. So where I'm sort of speaking is, the start of it for us, it came out of the property management and the facilities management. So within Colliers, we call it our real estate management services arm, and they look after, a huge amount of square meters of commercial office, and industrial across the country. So here in the ACT, I think at the time they probably had 30 to 40% of the commercial office under management within the ACT. So that was a huge number. And so working closely with that team and then getting introductions to all the building owners around town and looking at what that forward capital works book looked like, had the opportunity to go, right, well, what building upgrades did they need at the time? Was it a repositioning? Was it a new end of trip? Was it a new foyer? Was it tenants moving in and working with the leasing team and delivering fit outs? It was always about having that bolt-on service to our core business of real estate management and leasing and offering the project management as the add-on. Yes, you had to sell the service, and obviously selling that service was about providing value. So for me, I knew I could provide value at every step of the way from my background of being in that straight project management discipline, and then overlaying that with a bit of leasing I'd learned, a bit of the tenant advisory I'd learned when I've come into Colliers, and for more of a holistic service rather than just that straight project management discipline.
It's quite entrepreneurial to take that on. Did you have to, I guess, take on some new skills that you didn't have beforehand?
Colliers is a very enterprising company. They really encourage everyone to, it doesn't matter if you're the first year starter or you've been in the business for 15 years, they're always looking for all of the operators to be that enterprising nature. That's what we like to think sets us apart a little bit. Go and find that client that's out of the box. Go and find that project that's very unique and introduce it to, the other people and the experts we have in the business. So for me, when I'd come across, I'd come into this environment, which was very much like go and uncover, go and meet, go and learn, go and grow, and be enterprising. There was no ceiling. It was just, if you can make it happen, we'll back you and you'll support you. And look, the business was in a great spot. It was in a great spot across the country. They were more than happy to take the chance, and that, yes, it was slow and it was hard, but for me, it was always going to succeed. It was never about being the biggest. It was never about being hundreds and hundreds big in Canberra. It was always about just building a really solid team that could do a really good job and complement our other businesses.
Well, speaking of Canberra and the ACT, it's a very unique market that's heavily government driven. What does it take to win and deliver work in that environment?
Yeah, good question. Look, it is very much a different place. There is, the Commonwealth government has changed as well over the years. We are at whim of the government of the day, whether it's an insourcing or an outsourcing model. And back then it was definitely insource, under the coalition, it was from a project management service offering. You could go and hunt of the variety of the Commonwealth entities and either get on their panels or make the right relationships to get involved in the projects. Notwithstanding today, it's much more, reduced consulting across the board anywhere you can. And it's only really those really specialised panels like the Defence Infrastructure panel and some of the other big ones, Home Affairs and AFP and Services Australia and the like, that where those opportunities still. But I would say from Colliers' perspective, whilst there's a lot of project management in Canberra and they're working for the Federal Public Service, we've never really played in that space. We've always been working more in the private enterprise side, and we haven't had, whilst we are on the panels and we do get the tenders and we do, but there's a lot of the times where we go, well, look, we're not there to make up the numbers. We'd rather go and work within our private clients and work on that side of those side of the equations. And a lot of them are, I guess, Commonwealth projects, but we're working on the private side of that Commonwealth project, not necessarily the Commonwealth side, if that makes sense. So look, it helps growing up in the town and understanding how that works. And obviously from my former life, back in point project management and RPS, they were very much completely the opposite. It would have been 75% of their work was Commonwealth projects, big panels, Department of Defence, AFP, Home Affairs. It was all those big Commonwealth government, whereas shifting across to Colliers and doing it's been sort of none of that. It's all been private. And whether that's private, local, private, national, institutional, work, not for profit, it ranges across, but it's still not coming out of that, that government procurement model.
So I guess a lot of your work would be based on repeat work and referrals. Would that be right?
Yes, without a doubt, particularly in that sort of professional service division like project management. I think across our our business, the project management business in Australia, it would be 50 to 60% of clients is repeat business.
So what is it that you and your team do differently in delivery to make sure that you can have those long-term relationships?
Well, it's always about providing value to the client. So if you're providing value in a service and you're in partnership with them, they will come back. If you're not providing that value and you're not providing any expertise within that project scene, they'll eventually go, well, we'll go to someone else who will, or they'll insource it. There's a variety of models. So when you can provide the value to them, and it might not necessarily be in just that straight project management discipline. It might be being able to introduce them to the next project, being able to introduce them through to the next, the next source of capital, the next investment, the next site. That's the benefit of Colliers and where we sit within the marketplace. We've got a wealth of property, real estate across Australia. The network is such that you can have a project management project happening in Jindabyne, but I know someone's then wants to do something else in Jindabyne, and you connect them. You can become the concierge. That often leads to that repeat business and the introduction into the next project. So for me, it's always about providing value and making sure you're recognising where you sit within that for the client and where you can bring the additional, just the X factor to it at some stage in the project.
Yeah, that makes very good sense. So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about Mastt, because I know that your team uses the Mastt software, which we're very proud to have Colliers as one of our clients, of course. So I guess while you probably don't use the software hands-on every day in your role, no doubt you would see the reporting that comes out of that. How does that reporting serve you in your role?
Well, certainly. So when you when you have a lot of repeat clients and clients with larger portfolios, when you're delivering a portfolio work, that reporting is critical. So the discussions around Mastt and bringing in Mastt into our project management capability was really about portfolio reporting and making sure that when you're delivering on a portfolio of 5 projects, 10 projects, 15 projects, that it could be consistent and it could all roll up into a executive report, a board level report, a director's report. So someone who isn't hands-on in the project can digest the information really quickly on what's the finances looking like, what's the program looking like, what's the risk looking like. And Mastt was a software that could do it, right? I knew it could do it. The discussions, we had when we were doing the investigations, it was designed in that manner and it was exactly what we needed. Whilst there was, a short time of doing some testing and getting across what it all looked like, shortly thereafter, we were rolling it across particularly our portfolio, works, whether it's state governments or local government authorities, and then our private clients, particularly where we had that multiple project and we needed that monthly reporting ability.
When I speak to clients, often they talk about the reliability that they feel they get from the data when they do use a piece of software like Mastt. Is that something that you consider when you take those reports and you are obviously passing them up to the board and I guess really putting your name and your reputation on the line when you are presenting any report to a board?
Yeah. Look, the Mastt platform, it takes away the ability to make simple errors. From mine, it was more back in the day when you're creating your monthly reports and you're dragging Excel spreadsheet after Excel spreadsheet, the ability for incorrect numbers, incorrect errors could actually multiply and become a huge mistake. And if you're in a decision-making period and you're looking at numbers, those mistakes are critical. Look, with the Mastt platform, it actually takes the numbers that are set up from the project from day one, and it just can turn it into a report, right, at that point in time. So it's rigid enough so you don't have those mistakes, but flexible enough to tailor make it to the projects you need, whether it's a large scale project, a small project, an infrastructure project, a building project, whatever that may be. It sort of has that, that flexibility, but it cuts out that simple mistake, which, when you're back in the old Excel days can be a, a big issue error.
So I want to talk a little bit about AI, if that's okay. So originally I was going to ask you about what constraints you might be facing as a business serving government, but you've really highlighted that while you are serving government, primarily you are interacting directly more in the private sector. Are you facing any constraints in regards to how you can use AI for your team?
No, we haven't had any clients or any saying, put constraints on the AI at the moment. I think we're still in the discovery phase. We're still in the investigation phase. We're still learning on where we can use it, where we can't use it. I think everyone's in that same boat at the moment. So we're trying to work within our teams at the moment where we can get the efficiencies out of it, where we can still make sure that it's not that it's the expert piece of advice, and trying to streamline processes where we know there's either multiple duplications or it's really inefficient. So we're still at the moment in that discovery phase, and we haven't yet got to the point where it's all been implemented and clients have seen and go, actually, no, that's not what we want as a service. We want to go back, right. So no one's yet said, right, this is what we can do and this is what we can't do. Everyone's sort of gone, all right, well, where are the opportunities? Let's discover, let's use, let's test, let's work it out. And I think everyone's sort of doing that. And so we're finding benefits in some areas and negatives in some areas. And no one's really landed on it at the moment. The simple thing that you've seen in the project management world and you bring it in is like meeting minutes. Something so simple that when I grew up, you had to learn how to write meeting minutes, and you had to learn how to, get the conversation from the meeting onto the paper and get the actions. That's an automated thing that can be done now from AI, but there's still obviously the review and the finesse that needs to go into it. So it's changed it. It's made it way more efficient, but it still needs the review, because you've seen it, I've seen it. Whenever you review something like that, doesn't get it right, and you come back to the conversation on the Excel spreadsheet, that's significant error. If you do not do the review and you do not do the QA, can be a critical issue down the line in 6 months if you haven't actually gone through it and corrected it at the time. So there's a lot of lessons about getting it right, and I don't think it's going to be a quick, this is going to go on for, we're forever going to be learning, and, that continuous improvement and continuous discovery on how it implements. So how we can integrate it into all of our businesses.
Is there anything that excites you about AI that you think, I'm really excited that I hope we can do this in the future?
Yeah. Look, I think, with all these things, there's benefits, and there's benefits in it. There's also negatives. Some of it scares me a little bit, across, certain areas, but what does it really excite? Look, you move into some of those at the moment, things in like rendering and seeing imagery that the AI can create with not the time and the expense that we used to have to go through to sort of picture what something was going to look like in the future. The ability for AI to scrape those drawings, and to scrape and to put it into to render like imagery, and not necessarily needs to be a fit out or an apartment, just anything is, I think is pretty astronomical. So those sort of little things that used to take a long time and cost a lot of money now can happen, and anyone can access it really quickly. I think that's, those sort of things are pretty exciting, but also just the day-to-day administration of my life, where there's huge amounts of things going on and you can never get to the bottom of your to-do list. The AI can actually sort some of that out and get it in order and get it in priorities quite efficiently. So it means that I can do more in a day, make more phone calls, meet more people, be closer to the team, ask questions. Whereas 5 years ago or a decade ago, it wasn't. You were just doing that manually and you couldn't get to as much. So that's exciting.
Absolutely. Now, before we finish up, I do want to jump back to talking about when you were building the business unit within Colliers. So you built this business unit from scratch. Was there one decision or move that had the biggest impact when you were establishing that business unit?
Yes, there was. It was a particular client and a particular that changed it for us. That really sort of made that growth happen. And the point of time was forming a strategic partnership with them, and becoming their incumbent and doing that portfolio work. Without that, we would have been out there. And probably, if you look, 3 years later after that, or 4 years, can't remember exactly how long it's been, but we would not be in that position in that service line if we didn't do that. That was, that was sort of that big change, or that big decision point that sort of changed it. But we'd also been able to deliver on and provide value to that client. So I'm really proud of, going down that path and working that up with them, because it's been a long-standing strategic partnership, and I hope that continues now going forward. And there's other clients that would like to come in and be involved in that, and that, that incremental growth can happen in that team. Because for that particular business, I mentioned that their core activities aren't managing projects, or aren't looking at real estate, or aren't investing. They've got a different mission and different purpose. But to be able to have a relationship and a trust with Colliers, that Colliers will do right by them and bring them opportunity and look after that non-core business for them is what we do, and that's why it's been enduring, and hopefully into the future too.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. I guess often when organisations are delivering large capital projects, they will think about whether they're going to manage it internally or use an external consultancy or group like yourselves. What do you think some of the advantages are of bringing somebody in from the outside to do it, an expert?
Well, from my perspective, there is a cost efficiency on the basis that we can have a team running multiple projects at once. So you might not need a full-time operator or multiple full-time operators doing that role. It really depends on the size and the scale of the organisation, and what their commitment is to it. So how I mean by that is, I can offset costs and provide a more efficient service to them because I've got actually 8 of those type of clients. You can put the right person in the right position for that particular client for that particular type. If they go out and just hire, they run the risk that they get the wrong person, they put them in the wrong spot, and the project fails. And to get a good one with the experience that you need, you're probably paying a higher dollar. Whereas for us, we can have a whole team, and we've got a whole team to pick from. We can put people in when we need, people out when we need, move to the next person. That doesn't cost the client. That's the benefit of having a subcontracted service or a partnership like that. You can have the conversation, you can move the people around, and then and you can just you can move forward. So it's not for everybody, but for some, it really works because they can do it really cost effectively. So the benefits of a strategic partnership is providing a lower cost, for the higher level of service, because you've got security on both sides, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I mean, no doubt you're able to attract the best and the brightest from the sector and be able to give your clients access to some of the best talent in the market they wouldn't necessarily have access to otherwise.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. We like to think that, with the Colliers brand and the clients that we do have and the relationships and the networks, we can provide a platform where you can be, working on that, $300-400 million project on, for a year here, but then you can actually move in and work on the $10 million not-for-profit project on this side that's grant funded by the government. And, there's absolutely a benefit for someone's career in terms of, also a reward for someone's career to have the diversification that Colliers has. We are a very diverse business, and becoming more diverse with our offerings, which is exciting, which means you're not just strapped in as a project manager every day. You actually get opened up to different projects, but internally to the business, you actually also get opened up to a variety of other service lines and service offerings. So your general, property and project knowledge actually expands because you're exposed to leasing, you're exposed to capital markets and investments, you're exposed to town planning and engineering design, all our resi projects. And it becomes a bit more of a holistic knowledge. And you might not be sitting in there learning every day. You learn it, via osmosis, because they're the people who, you're going into the team meetings with, you're having lunch with in the breakout and whatnot, and you're having those general discussions about what clients are doing and, what tenants are doing, or, what builders are doing what and who. So you've got a much more well-rounded And that's the benefit of a brand and a place like Colliers to come and work at.
Oh, you've definitely spoken something that is very close to my heart. I really do believe in the power of human interaction and being able to be around your colleagues face to face. So, and because I agree, there's a lot that you do learn from osmosis. My final question for you is a little bit of a big one, in that I want to ask you what advice you would offer to an organisation or a government agency that might be thinking about managing capital project reporting themselves right now. What advice would you give them if they were considering that?
Well, yeah, you need to set up your framework. It needs to match in line with your overarching, either government governance or business governance, project governance. So set it up. What's the tempo like? What's the stakeholder level like? What are your core areas that needs to be reported on? So you can set up that framework and go through that. You need experience to understand what to look out for, what's going to come down the chute, what's happening in the market, what's happening in the construction space at the moment, what's happening in the design, what's happening in utilities. So once you understand all that and you got your framework, you go, right, what's the platform I'm going to use? Am I going to create this myself? Am I going to do it manually? But yes, you can shift it through to, that automation as we discussed, whether it's an AI model, whether it's a Mastt model, where it's a different, there's plenty out there. But for us, having the confidence there that it's a consistent report, it's simple for the operators to use. It gives the data that's already coming from our system, regularly, and you can use that whether you're discussing it with the builder or the design team or the client. It's coming from the same spot, so it's really consistent, it's trustworthy, and ultimately that reduces the risk. So if I was advising someone, I'd try and give them all those points and let them make that decision themselves. And hopefully it steers towards a platform like Mastt that can give them that, that regular reporting tool and dashboard tool that they can extract the correct information out to make the right decisions and to reduce the risk.
Well, on that note, we're going to wrap up because we're running out of time, but I do want to say a big thank you to Iain.
No problem. Enjoyed it.
Thanks for watching, guys. If you want to know more about construction and get all the professional tips, tricks, and AI advice from real construction project managers, follow this channel for more insights.